The Heisei era in Godzilla. I mean, what could be said about it that already hasn't been said? Honestly, a lot, because I haven't heard anyone talk about this masterpiece. Typically, when one talks about the Heisei era of Godzilla, they're talking about the series of films that take place between 1984 and 1995. And I'm talking about some absolute bangers. Dadgum, Return of Godzilla. Ever heard of it? Godzilla vs. Biollante versus King Ghidorah versus Mothra versus Megaguirus 2. Not 1, 2. Versus Space Godzilla versus Destroyer. These are all fantastic pieces of media, for sure. But why do I care so much, you might be wondering? It feels like a return to form for the G-Man, you know? Godzilla isn't a hero, he's a villain. Mostly, that is, in these movies, he's a villain. You could argue that in versus Destroyer and versus Space Godzilla that he's the protagonist of that. I always root for Godzilla regardless, but, like, seriously, you really think a giant dinosaur that can nuke an entire city with just breathing really hard is going to be a friend of humanity? Y'all ever seen what elephants do to small towns? Just picture that times 500 and then make it nuclear powered. And now you got Godzilla. So this is also the era of probably my favorite design Godzilla has ever had. Not necessarily in the Return of Godzilla, but in all subsequent films after that. Oh, it's beautiful. Just look at this thing's face and tell me it's not adorable. Don't tell me that, or I will bite you. Seriously, one of my favorite things about this series of films, the Heisei era that is that it is a direct continuation of the first movie. In fact, in the Return of Godzilla, after the initial attack of Godzilla on, I think, a fishing boat or something like that, we're talking to one of the survivors, and the professor that is talking to him hands him a folder, and it's full of photos. When he opens it up, it's all of the photos. There's a bunch of photos from the first movie. Glorious. Beautiful. Ask them, is this what you saw? The guy's like, this is exactly what I saw. So now they're like, dang it, there's another Godzilla out there. And then in the end of the films, Godzilla vs. Destroyer, if you didn't know, spoiler alert by the way for all of these movies, is that the monster Destroyer is the physical incarnation of the weapon that destroyed the original Godzilla. Cue George Lucas.
Again, it's like poetry, so if they rhyme.
That's not even, we've talked about the G-Man, but that's not even talking about what the humans have come up with in this series of films. Dadgum Mechagodzilla 2? Not 1, 2? Look at that machine. I love that design. I love that design so much. Looking at it gives me such nostalgia, and I think it's because, hold on a second, this right here, if you can't tell, hope that focuses, is Mechagodzilla 2. This is also one of my oldest figurines, one of my oldest toys, let's call them what they are, right? That I currently own. That's all of my toys. I have had this toy since I was 4. Maybe. We weren't even out of Florida at that point, so maybe 4. But also, Mogira, elephant in the room. That design is probably the worst design in all of Godzilla history. That is including the dead people on the initial ship from The Return of Godzilla. Real quick, total side note, it is still about Mogira, I promise. We will move on with the video, but have y'all ever played Godzilla Unleashed? Mogira was way OP. So many ranged attacks, and when you got up close to him, he had so many grappling attacks that it was like, I played him constantly because you could beat anyone with him easily, because I'm cheap. Look, if you aren't cheating, you aren't trying. Speaking of things I didn't like, Godzilla vs. Biollante. The lab scene where Biollante is first found and those like tentacles with the faces on them are attacking people. The blood has always unsettled me, and I'm not talking about the human's blood because you barely see any of that. I'm talking about the like fluid that comes out of Biollante's like tendrils. Always. I've been very unsettled by that since I was a child. Let's get back to what I love. Sticking with Biollante, Godzilla vs. Biollante, that is the music. Oh Lord, so good. That music is just, I mean, just listen to this. Speaking of which, old Biollante here, gotta be my third favorite kaiju in all of the Godzilla series. The fact that we've never seen Biollante really in any other piece of media aside from like a couple of video games and stuff Very disappointing to me. I feel like she would really benefit from Legendary, the whole Legendary era that we're going through right now. Just the way everything kind of seems a little bit more jagged and dark and there. For those of you who don't know, speaking of Biollante, I keep calling her a her. It's because she is a her. What Biollante is like a mad science experiment that crawled out of the test tube. Essentially what happened was a doctor had a daughter, I believe, lost her in like a car accident, or I think an attack from Godzilla, something. I can't remember. It's like 12 a.m. I can't remember. Then, in order to keep in contact with his daughter, to keep his daughter around, basically for genetic cloning later on, I'm pretty sure, he spliced her genes with that of Rose's. They got spliced, and he hired a psychic to come in to talk to the Roses so that he could figure out like what was going on in the psyche of this Rose that was now kind of his daughter at the same time. So he splices Godzilla's genes in with the already mixed daughter/Rose genes, and they create this, which then creates this, or this. It's a little bit of a step up. You already know how I feel about Godzilla versus King Ghidorah. Godzilla versus Mothra, on the other hand, Godzilla versus Mothra is kind of like a why not situation. Wait, I can see it in your eyes. Y'all newbies thought that Mothra and Godzilla were always friends? Also, can we just look at that poster? Oh my word, are you kidding me right now? First off, gorgeous. Second off, one of the most nostalgic posters from my childhood. Of any movie series whatsoever. Of any movie at all, honestly. It's fantastic, but also, I would also recommend looking at Godzilla vs. Biollante, that poster. They kind of were friends in this movie as well. Just kind of like, the enemy of my enemy is my friend.
Mackerel, you ever hear the old saying, the enemy of my enemy is my friend?
Christ, one day you're going to find that cuts both ways.
They have a common enemy, which is Megaguirus, which is like a anti-Mothra. It's like a giant dinosaur dragonfly thing. And Megaguirus wants to kill Godzilla and Mothra at the same time. My guy never studied history and learned from a certain funny mustachioed man that you can't fight two enemies at the same time on two separate fronts. Yikes. Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla 2. Pretty standard. Y'all ever seen mecha anime? No, not that one. Okay, that's better. Until you get the introduction of my favorite winged man in all of Godzilla cinematic history, aside from King Ghidorah, which is Rodan. Once again, in the fighting games on the PS2, the PS3, and yes, the Wii, he was pretty good. He's pretty good as well. Small, so the hitbox was small, but he could deal a lot of damage when he needed to. And then I think in the Wii one, he could like fly around the map as well, so he was hard to hit unless with like a beamed attack. Now we're on to Godzilla versus Space Godzilla, and I'm sure, listen, I'm sure y'all know, Space Godzilla is he's just like Godzilla, you know, but he's from space. The 80s were a different time. Also, Megaguirus shows up. This is where Megaguirus shows up, and it's underwhelming, to say the least. When Space Godzilla first shows up, he's like this weird diamond floating thing. It's really weird. He eventually turns into like Space Godzilla. Rodan gets the ever-living crap beat out of him, so does Godzilla. Rodan sacrifices his life energy or whatever to give to Godzilla. Godzilla gets up and then beats the crap out of Space Godzilla. It's honestly, it's pretty standard Godzilla stuff. I know Legendary hasn't shown it yet, so if anybody is stumbling across this as a newbie, Godzilla has the ability to receive life energy from other kaiju that willfully give it up. That's been a thing for a while. The same kind of thing happens in Godzilla Final Wars. That movie is a series of videos by itself because I love it so much. Now we're getting into the Tearjerker. This is the sad one. This is the one where everybody dies. Here's the thing, as a kid, I didn't know that everybody died, and I didn't see this movie until I was probably like 15 years old, and that's still a kid. I understand that's still, I understand as a child. It's still a child. But when I learned that everyone died, y'all ready for this? My sister went to a boarding school and brought one of her friends home. Her friend happened to be Japanese. I was like nerding out as a child. I was like 12 when this all happened. I was nerding out, man. Japanese friend can finally come over and read my Godzilla cards? Yes, that seems racist. No, I don't care. But, because I was a child, I didn't understand what was going on. So I was like, you can read this. So we're going through this whole collection of Godzilla cards I have, which is, you know, it's a rather sizable collection. And we come across the one that I really want her to translate because it's Godzilla and he's got like all these bits of him that are like made out of fire and stuff. I'm like, man, can you translate this for me? And she's like, oh, she sounds really sad. And she's like, do you want to know? Because we'd gone through like a bunch of cards at this time. She's like, do you really want to know what that means? And I'm like, yeah, of course I want to know what that means. And she's like, this directly translates to like, Godzilla dies. Shattered my world. I didn't think Godzilla could die. Spoiler alert, Godzilla dies in this. Like, 2 Godzillas die in this, by the way. Destroyer shows up and just, ready for this? Destroys everything in its path. But Godzilla, that flame pattern Godzilla, the fiery Godzilla, the burning Godzilla that I'd seen, is because he's having a meltdown, a literal meltdown after his son freaking dies, and just like waltzes up on the scene and murks Destroyer. Destroyer is another one of those kaiju that could 100% make a comeback in this legendary series because it's terrifying. Destroyer, when it's small and it's like in that crab-like state, it just goes around and murders people, like left and right. If you guys don't know, Destroyer, I mentioned it earlier in the video, but Destroyer is the oxygen destroyer that killed the original Godzilla. It's the physical incarnation of it. It's the animals that could survive in the anti-oxygen, basically, that weapon created. And it eventually evolved, adapted, and became Destroyer. So that was the Heisei era of Godzilla. Heisei? I'm gonna say Heisei. Era of Godzilla. Favorite video from this series is Godzilla vs. Biollante. No cap. I love Godzilla vs. Biollante. Myriad of reasons I've kind of gone over in this. Biollante, when it finally becomes like its final form, terrifying. And it's like a one-off organism that is able to hold its own for a little while against Godzilla, as opposed to all of these other creatures that are like either man-made, or there's like multiple of them, or creature that is from space with crystals growing out of its back. I don't know. Godzilla vs. Biollante. Biollante, like, honestly, great creature design. Love that stupid thing. The props that are used for it are creepy, they're gross, they're wet, they're slimy, and they're super cool. And as a child, that was my jam, man. I love Biollante. My least favorite is honestly Godzilla vs. Space Godzilla. I don't know why. Space Godzilla has always reminded me of a man in a suit. I don't know. My brain's weird. Don't worry about it. Also, Megaguirus in it, and y'all already know how I feel about Megaguirus. So, the most fun I can have in a Godzilla movie in this series is Godzilla vs. King Ghidorah, because it's just balls to the wall insane. Once again, here's that video. Sorry.
Take that, you dinosaur!
It's my favorite era so far. Legendary is getting up there because of the representation of all of my favorite kaiju, specifically King Ghidorah and Rodan. It is not my favorite, specifically because of Godzilla's design. I'm not particularly a fan of the elephantine kind of design that Legendary has gone for. I very much so like the cat-like design, the feline design of the Heisei era. So I want to thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed what you saw, please like, subscribe, comment down below with something. I don't care. Make sure you always take the stairs. Keep that thing on you. If you get tired, please pull over. That extra couple of minutes or hours of driving, sorry that you jiggled around just a little bit there, are not worth your safety, your wallet, your car, or your cargo. And have a good night or day, whatever time of the day it is you're watching this. Bye.
Sweet